everyone else was able to go back to their trucks to retrieve their things, but ours was still locked, so I was not able to retrieve anything.
Ultimately, you did retrieve your property?
Correct.
Okay. At one point, there was a negligent discharge on set we've heard about, and that involved you handling a firearm, is that right?
Yes.
And again, you were trying to let the hammer down, and you had your finger on the trigger, and then it went off, is that correct?
Yes.
And that was with one of the revolvers?
Correct.
After that, didn't you have a disagreement with Miss Gutierrez Reed?
A small one, yes.
Did you thereafter have discussions with people about wanting to fire Hannah?
I didn't want to fire her. I had my disagreements with her, but I never actually fired her or wanted to.
Okay, you said you didn't want to fire her?
No.
Do you recall being interviewed on November 2nd, 2023 in this case?
Yes.
And you were asked the question, okay, did you want to fire her? Your answer is yes, and that's on page 19, 2 to 3. Did you want to fire her? You said yes.
Okay.
Do you recall saying that?
I do.
Okay, so is it true then that you wanted to fire her?
From props, yes.
Okay, but a second ago you said you had not made that statement, but...
Yeah, I'm correcting myself now.
Okay. So the reality is that you had wanted to fire her?
From props.
Yes. And other people had wanted to fire her as well, right?
From Seth or...
Just in general?
I believe Seth wanted me to do something about it, yes.
And I think what you just stated is you did not do anything, ultimately.
I did not know.
One of the reasons why you had wanted to fire Hannah is that you didn't feel she was doing enough with her props duties.
Correct.
And you communicated that to Hannah as well, right?
I did not.
You did not tell her that? That you wanted her to do more in her props duties?
I don't think I actually told her that. I just had asked her to do things and she didn't want to do them.
Did you know that Hannah and Gabrielle Pickle then had a disagreement over props duties?
I did hear about it, yes.
Okay. And there was an email that you knew about?
Hannah showed me, yes.
Okay. And I'm not going to ask you to talk about the contents of it, but you did see an email on that?
Yes.
That was approximately October 16th or 17th that you had that disagreement, right?
About?
With Hannah, that small disagreement?
Oh, yes.
And so that's 5 days before the shooting.
Okay.
And then at what point was the decision made by you that you wanted to fire Hannah? Was it the 16th? Was it the 17th? Do you remember what day that was?
I don't.
You talked to Seth Kinney about that?
Yes.
How many times did you talk to him about that?
I don't know.
Now, one thing I forgot to ask you was after the 21st, after the incident had happened, you don't have a good memory of the sequence of events?
I do not.
You remember that yourself and Nicole had been at the prop cart when the shot went off, is that right?
Yes.
And you did not see Hannah at that point, or did you?
I had not.
Okay. Right after it happened, is the next time that you remember seeing Hannah was when they were unloading the revolver?
No, she was in front of the church, by herself looking at the church.
Okay. And then at some point they unload the revolver and then she goes over with Brian Norvell to one of the other houses. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Did you see Hannah get loaded into the police car?
No.
After the incident took place and you've come back and given Hannah her bag, did you talk to people on the set?
Yes.
And where were you standing when you were talking to people?
I was in the town at one point, and then back at base camp.
So did those people include Alec Baldwin and David Halls?
No.
Who did you talk to?
Jensen and Swen and Nicole.
Did you ever see or hear about a lawyer being on set?
No.
Okay. After that, what time did you leave the set?
To go back to base camp or home?
To leave completely.
Maybe not until 9:30.
Okay, so you stayed approximately 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah.
What were you doing during that time frame?
A lot of it was waiting around. We were at base camp for a long time, waiting to be interviewed by the police.
You were interviewed then on site?
Yes.
Okay. Since you were on site, you would have had the opportunity to tell the police at that point that you had thrown those rounds away, right?
Sure.
And you don't recall whether you did that?
I don't know.
Do you feel like that's something that you would remember if you had done it?
No.
Okay, I want to... I'm sorry, just a moment, Your Honor. Do you recall ever telling law enforcement that you had thrown those rounds away?
Yes.
When was that?
I remember telling them like a month later when I was talking to Detective Alex.
Okay, we're talking about October 21st, 21, when this happened.
Yes.
And you interviewed then. And you interviewed with Mr. Scott Elliott on November 2nd, 2023, correct?
With who?
Sorry. That was an interview with an investigator on this case. Mr. Elliott, do you recall that individual?
I do not.
Okay. In that interview, just to remind you, you had an attorney present. Do you remember that interview?
I remember Detective Alex.
Okay.
Elliott.
Do you not remember the interview in November of 2023 when Spirit Gaines was present?
I do not.
Okay. If I showed you a copy of this, it might refresh your memory?
Is there an objection? Can we approach?
Ma'am, I want to make sure that you're understanding what I'm asking. So you were interviewed with the police, as I understand it, 2 times. There was one on October 21st, 2021, and there was one, I think, a month later. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And do you remember being interviewed a 3rd time in a pretrial interview in this case on November 2nd, 2023? Not with the police, but with other people involved in this case.
I believe so.
Okay. And again, I'll ask you, do you remember the attorney Spirit Gaines was present?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the interview on I'm talking about, that was approximately 3 months ago.
Okay.
You recall that?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall in that interview talking about whether you had informed law enforcement
Of what?
about the throwing away of the rounds?
I don't recall what I said in that interview.
Okay. So that was 3 months ago, but I know you've had several interviews, but you do not remember that.
Not the specific conversation.
Okay. In any event, you did tell them at some point you think that you threw those rounds away. Do you recall what exactly that you told them?
I don't.
Okay. Did you also tell them that you had transported those firearms from that cart? Or that you had intended to and other people helped you?
I believe so.
Did you tell them that you had taken Hannah's personal bag to her?
I believe so.
Did you take anything else from the cart that we haven't talked about that day on October 21st, 2021?
No.
You also talked to Weston Brownlee after the shooting incident? Is that right?
He did send me a message, yes.
So you texted with him?
Briefly.
And that was about some of the things going on in this case, right?
Yes.
Do you recall being angry at Miss Gutierrez Reed at one point on or about October 29th, 2021? You said, "I hope she's put in jail. This is outrageous."
I don't remember the specific text message. I'd have to look at it.
If I showed it to you, would it refresh your memory?
Possibly.
Now that you've had a chance to read it, does that remind you whether you said that?
Yes.
So you agree that you said, "I hope she's put in jail. This is outrageous."
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further.
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. One moment.
Sure.
Ms. Zachary, you mentioned earlier that you had rattled some of the rounds to check if they were live.
Yes.
Did you notice that when law enforcement got there, the boxes were closed?
I don't remember.
Do you recall closing the box up after you had rattled the rounds?
I don't recall.
When the prop truck search was done days after the shooting, do you recall the prop cart being inside the prop truck?
When police came to retrieve the weapons, I
Yeah.
don't remember it being in the truck.
Did you go in the prop truck during the search?
After police left, yes.
Did you see the prop cart inside of it?
I don't remember.
Did you ever get the impression after in discussions with Mr. Kinney that he didn't want you to say anything
About
about anything? Not talk about anything?
with just anyone?
Yes.
That wasn't my impression.
Okay. Do you remember a point in time when you were texting with Mr. Kinney and you had indicated that you were talking to Alec Baldwin and then he responds with an emoji?
I don't recall.
You don't recall ever getting an emoji with the hand over the mouth?
No.
Do you know what that means, that emoji that I'm talking about? One where it's just kind of going like that?
No. I mean,
Does it not mean to keep your mouth closed?
it's not what I see that as.
Okay. So in your testimony, you don't believe Mr. Kinney ever told you not to talk to people about what had happened? That's your testimony.
I don't recall.
Okay. Your Honor, I have nothing further.
Redirect, thank you.
Ms. Zachary, I've got a few follow-up questions for you. Do you recall the specific language of your cooperation agreement with the state of New Mexico in terms of the requirement that you testify truthfully?
Yes.
Do you recall the specific language?
Oh, no.
Would it refresh your memory if I showed it to you?
Sure.
Take your time and review that paragraph, and then I'll ask you some questions about it. Are you required to give truthful testimony?
Yes.
What happens to your agreement with me if you don't give truthful testimony?
Then I'm not bound by that testimony or that cooperation agreement anymore.
Right. If you don't give truthful testimony, I can prosecute you if I want to, right?
Correct.
You were asked a variety of questions about whether or not you wanted to fire Ms. Gutierrez. Do you recall those questions?
Yes.
In terms of your role as boss of Ms. Gutierrez, you were only her boss with regard to her work with props, is that right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the... Oh, sorry. I have an objection.
Were you in charge of firearms on this set?
No.
Were you in charge of props?
Yes.
Explain to the jury what your role was with regard to supervising Ms. Gutierrez in her capacity as prop assistant versus armorer.
When it came to being a props assistant, that's where I would ask her to help me with those miscellaneous props that I had mentioned earlier. But armor is in a different department from my understanding, and so she was in charge of that. So what she said goes for the weapons, not props.
Does the armorer have autonomy when it comes to weapons?
Yes.
During the time that you worked with Ms. Gutierrez, did you find her to be easy to work with?
No.
During the time that you worked with Ms. Gutierrez as her supervisor in props, did she call you a cunt?
Yes.
Was it around that time that you decided you might want to fire her?
No, it was just overall. But
What else about working with Ms. Gutierrez was difficult other than her referring to you as a cunt?
mainly, I just felt like her work ethic wasn't the greatest. She wasn't always willing to help in a year or two. She was usually wanting to be in the truck to clean guns for the day. And yeah.
Did Ms. Gutierrez ever show up to set late?
One day, yes.
Did she give you a reason for that?
She had a migraine.
She told you she had a migraine,
Correct.
but she was able to show up and work At some point that day, right?
Yes.
So apparently the migraine didn't last all day?
No.
After the incident, did you have contact with Ms. Gutierrez when she was sitting in the back of Mr. Benavidez's police car?
I believe so, yes.
And why were you having contact with her?
I was just checking on her to see if she was okay.
And did you ask her if she was okay?
Yes.
And what was her response?
I don't recall.
Did she express concerns to you about how this might affect her career?
Yeah.
Object.
Ms. Zachary, during that conversation, do you recall Ms. Gutierrez saying anything about her career?
Yes.
And what did she say to the best of your recollection?
I don't remember verbatim, but it was about that this was going to ruin her career.
Now, at the time that she's telling you that she's worried about her career, is there a life flight helicopter on the ground waiting for Ms. Hutchins?
Your Honor, objection again.
Overruled.
I think it was before that.
It was before life flight arrived.
It was right after the incident.
But police were on set, correct?
I
Your Honor,
don't.
again.
Hang on a second. I'm sorry. I agree with you. When you spoke to Ms. Gutierrez, where was she?
She was in front of the church.
When you spoke to her about her concerns about her career, where was she?
She was in front of the church.
I'm sorry, she wasn't in the police car.
No, we didn't talk about that at that point.
You didn't talk about that at that point.
Not that I recall.
Okay. At the time that you spoke to her and she indicated concerns about her career, what was happening?
Chaos. Everyone was trying to figure out what happened.
Were people screaming?
It was after Joel screamed, and I know that the script supervisor was getting angry at everyone.
Do you know, was 911 being called?
I didn't, like I said before, I didn't hear 911 call or being called, but I assumed that they were being called.
If you know, were people laying on the floor of the church?
I saw Joel at that point.
You didn't see Miss Hutchins,
I didn't see Halyna at all.
but you understand that she was laying on the floor also.
Your Honor, objection.
At some point later, did you realize that Miss Hutchins was injured?
I was told, yes.
And when you saw Ms. Gutierrez after the incident, was she standing at the door of the church?
She was a little further back.
At any point in time, did you see her standing at the door of the church?
No, I don't recall.
Okay. Can you explain to the jury why you thought it was important after the incident to remove the guns from the area and get them back to the truck?
And like I said, Jensen Ackles had told me to get the guns to safety, so that's what we were intending on doing, was to remove them from the set and get them back to the safe on the prop truck.
And you were asked to provide Ms. Gutierrez her personal bag, is that right?
Yes.
And I want you to describe that for the jury. What did it look like?
I don't remember.
Was it the fanny pack or not?
Your Honor, objection.
I don't think that's leading. Was it the
Overruled.
fanny pack?
I don't remember.
Okay. You talked to Mr. Bowles about the fact that on occasion you would throw away dummies after a scene was shot. Why would you do that?
I didn't need them anymore.
Is that something that you did when you were working on the set of Rust?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. How many times do you think you did that during filming?
I don't know.
Do you know whether production has purchased those dummies or whether they are renting them?
At the time, I had thought they were purchased, but after reading the invoices, I found out that they were rentals.
So who were they renting them from?
The vendors, Seth Kenny and Billy Ray.
Okay. At some point, you were asked by law enforcement to agree to a full extraction of your cell phone, correct?
Yes,
And did you agree to do that?
I did.
Mr. Bowles asked you some questions about your contact with Mr. Baldwin. To the best of your recollection, what specifically was the issue that you and Mr. Baldwin spoke of?
Mainly how a live round ended up on set.
So Mr. Baldwin wanted to find out how a live round ended up on the movie set, right?
Yes,
Did you also?
I did want to know, yes.
And Mr. Bowles asked you about a text message where you indicated you were trying to keep your facts straight.
Mm-hmm.
What did you mean by that?
I was trying to recall things correctly when I was telling people things.
Did you have difficulty recalling certain things?
Yes.
Why?
I mean, in a state of shock and when everything is crazy, I couldn't remember things quite right.
You were asked some questions about Mr. Kinney being present the day of the search of the prop truck. To be clear, where was the safe that housed the guns?
On the prop truck.
Was it inside the truck?
Yes.
And could anyone get into the safe if the truck was locked?
No.
You had to get into the truck to get into the safe.
Yes.
And you understood that the safe was locked, or that the truck was locked.
Yes.
At any point in time, if you recall, did you tell production, anyone in production, that you needed more assistance with props?
Yes.
Do you know whether it was before or after that that Ms. Pickle had a conversation with Ms. Gutierrez?
It was before.
Do you have any experience in police investigations?
No.
Do you have any idea what the police are looking for on a crime scene?
No.
Were the guns or the dummy rounds that were assigned to Mr. Ackles and Mr. Timmel involved in the incident?
No.
I don't have anything further.
Your Honor, may we approach briefly?
Sure. right, you're excused, thank you.
I'll reserve Ms. Zachary for the record.
All right, so don't talk to the other witnesses in this case. She may be recalled. Okay, so next witness. Maybe we'll take a bathroom break. Is this gonna?
Yes, Your Honor.
Who is?
Whatever you choose. I think he's ready, but if you'd like to take the break now, I don't mind.
All right, let's take a bathroom break. Please don't talk among yourselves or anyone else about the evidence received here in court. We'll be back at 10. Thank you.
All rise.